It is a grey, dreary day in London, England. But I have stolen the light I used to self-tape, we have set it up, we have light, we have books. What more could you possibly ask from me? Today we're going to do my February wrap-up. I have a big old pile of books in front of me. I'm also going to stick in my January reads as well because I never did a wrap-up in January. So I figured we would just do both months together, double the amount of books. I think we're just going to jump right on into it. So, actually, the first book that I read, I think it was the first book I read this year, I actually don't have a copy of because I listened to it as an audiobook, and that was The Curfew by T.M Logan. This feels like I've read this book so long ago, and that is a testament to how many books I've read since then and how like busy this year has felt already. I'm filming this right at the start of March, so it's like we've read so many books like since. I finished this January 1st, I think. That could be an absolute lie, but I have in my head that I finished this literally on New Year's Day. This was your classic thriller with kind of a twist. So it was a boy called Connor, I think. Take that name with a pinch of salt. And his father had given him a really strict curfew to be back by, I want to say midnight. Basically, Connor missed that curfew and couldn't explain where he was. And then a girl goes missing and it's like, that's not ideal, where were you? And he like doesn't want to say. And basically the kind of twist on the thriller is that it's kind of all to do with how far will a parent go to protect a child, especially when the adult doesn't necessarily know like if the child has done something wrong or if they even deserve their protection. And it's kind of like a town full of parents trying to do right by their children even though they don't know if their children have got messed up in something. And it's quite an interesting like psychological twist on it. I then read A Little Life by Hanya, Yanagihara, and boy oh boy oh boy, I have never in my life been so deeply affected after reading a book. I think for probably about 5 days straight after reading this book, I just genuinely felt like this kind of like undercurrent of sadness, like just throughout my life. And it had no real explanation other than I knew it had come from the book. Like, it just made me so genuinely sad. And I don't think I've ever been affected for that long by a book. This is stunning. It's about 4 men living in New York City, and it kind of just follows them from like early 20s through like a lot of their lives. And it kind of has some flashbacks to childhood stuff. Check the trigger warnings. It has sort of everything you can imagine in here. Hanya Yanagihara introduces the most lovely characters and then lets you follow their journey as the most unimaginably horrible things happen to them, just kind of over and over again. Particularly Jude, who we kind of end up focusing most on. She creates this completely whole, wonderful character, then talks you through all of his trauma from his childhood and all of the ways that's affecting him now, plus all the new traumas he goes through as an adult. And it's completely heartbreaking and heart-wrenching and horrible and beautiful and absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, I've never been so affected by a book in my life. Like, I know everyone says you have to mentally prepare for it, but you really do. 720 pages of pain is what this book is, but gorgeous pain. Then also in January we read Present Laughter by Noel. This was the play that we picked for January's TBR. I can't remember what the TBR prompt was. You can watch it up there if you want to know for yourself. But this is a comedy slash farce slash drama play. It is, I think it's like 90 something pages. No, complete lie. It's 143 pages. I think it took me about 2.5 hours to read. Gary is the main character and he's basically about to go on a tour in Africa, and before he does, he's basically gotten himself into some situations, some quite mostly light-hearted situations, but it also kind of like has those deeper moments as well. But basically you get that kind of farcical thing of everyone seems to end up in his apartment, everyone's like being hidden away in rooms. It's kind of that classic like sitcom feel of like people coming in and out at the wrong moment and people being hidden away and trying to get people to not talk to certain people. And it's quite light-hearted and fun. It did have some like deeper content in there, but for the most part like a very easy one to just sort of fly through. And I actually saw this years ago, I don't even remember when, with Andrew Scott playing the lead, and it was fabulous and very, very funny. Then also in January we read Gone by Michael Grant. This is actually a reread of this series that I'm doing because when I was a teenager I read every single book except the last book. There were 6 books and I read 5 of them and I loved them, and I don't know why I never read the last one. I don't know, I wasn't very good at finishing books when I was a kid, so the fact that I read 5 was actually quite impressive. But this is about a world in which all the adults disappear and the kids left behind are trapped in this dome, and they start developing like magical powers, and it's very, very dark. It's a dystopia, but it's got a bit of everything. It's got some romance subplots in it, it's got some like horror elements, I would say, but this is the first one. This kind of follows the sort of like initial panic of this like new society that they're trying to create, and they've called it the Phase, and it's kind of like people fighting for power over this new world, and then kind of trying to find like a new normal and a new way of working. And yeah, this is one of those series that just holds a place in my heart because I read it as a teenager and it was like one of the first book series that I like properly fell in love with, and so to be back in that world is just great. And I do genuinely think it's such brilliant storytelling. I mean, my mum read these a few years ago, so I think even though they are kind of YA, they don't read like YA to me. Like YA I can sometimes find quite jarring if it feels really young, and like this doesn't at all, like even remotely. But yeah, super happy to be back in this world. Kane and Diana, I think I've said it before, are one of my favourite book couples ever to exist, and I just absolutely adore them, and I can't wait to continue reading their scenes, and I know what comes for them, and I need to know what ends as well. So basically we're doing this entire reread to read the final book to find out how this ends, and I can't wait. And yeah, we should be able to read this whole series this year, which will be exciting. That was it for January. We actually only read 4 books in January, but one of them was A Little Life, which is 720 pages, so I count that as at least 2 books. So we're going to move on to February. Okay, in this month we read 6 books, one of which is incredibly long, so again I'm counting as 2, so we're going to call it 7 books. But the first lot we did a reading vlog on. We read romance books for a month. We read these 3. So first up we had Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This was light, fluffy, silly, hockey romance. Good vibes. There was some why can I not talk today? There was some deeper content in this talking about disordered eating. This follows Anastasia, who is a figure skater, and Nate, who is on the ice hockey team, and basically something happens and one of the rinks get trashed, so the ice hockey team and the figure skaters have to share an ice rink. And Anastasia is like quite that like type A personality where she has everything scheduled and it upsets her if it like doesn't go to schedule, and so she kind of automatically doesn't like Nate because he's in charge of the hockey team, and she blames him for the hockey rink being out of use. And so they kind of get off on the wrong foot, and then spoilers, literally not spoilers at all, they spark up a romance, and it's good, silly, fun times. I adored the dialogue in this. I thought it was so funny. It had me laughing out loud, which actually doesn't happen a lot with me in books, so I really enjoyed that. I own the second one, and I'm very excited to get to that. And I know a third one has just come out, and I just also think they're like the cutest, like prettiest books. They're just so like, is that not adorable? So yeah, I definitely need to get my hands on the third one, but I'm excited to read the second one as well. Then we read Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. This has been described to me many times as Gossip Girl set in London, and absolutely, that is exactly what it is. This follows Magnolia Parks and BJ Ballantyne, and they are basically in a toxic off-again, on-again relationship. And I think it is described as a romance. I would call it like a romantic drama. I think it feels very much like a drama, and it gives those like TV Gossip Girl vibes. I feel like this would make such a good TV show. And basically it follows Magnolia and BJ. Kind of something happened. They were in a long-term relationship. Something happened and they broke up. And that's kind of like the mystery subplot. I actually did guess what happened between their relationship, which was fun, and I always like to say when I get it right because I want credit. Basically, this book is the two of them doing things to either prove to each other how much they don't need the other one or prove to the other one how much they do need them. Like, it's a lot of game playing, it's a lot of using other people to like make the other one jealous, to like, so it's kind of like, they're not nice people. None of their friendship group are particularly nice. They're all quite self-absorbed and selfish. But like, I don't personally mind that. Like, I have never minded a morally grey main character or an unlikable main character, if you will. And in fact, I kind of prefer those books sometimes. I just think there's something fun about reading about characters who aren't perfect. It's not that these characters are relatable, they're not remotely relatable. They are incredibly rich socialites. Kind of, I don't really know what they do with their days. Like I actually don't know what they do with their lives other than like go to parties and drink and I mean, live your life, good for you, man. But like none of them have jobs, or I don't think, did they have jobs? I don't think they had jobs, I can't remember. But yeah, they're not necessarily likeable, they're not necessarily relatable, but I don't think they were ever supposed to be. You're there for the drama. This is a series, it then goes on to follow Daisy Parks, who was another character. Daisy Parks? No, Daisy Hates. Then goes on to follow Daisy Hates, who is another character, and I think that one's more mafia vibes, and then it comes back to Magnolia and BJ's story, so I think it cuts between the two different storylines over like 6 books or something. So it'll be interesting to see where they go next, because this one kind of ended in a bit of a blow up, if you will. And then lastly, in that romance video, I read Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover, which maybe this wasn't really a romance. I'm not convinced this was really a romance either, so I didn't do brilliant on picking books for a romance video. But like, they are, but they aren't, if you know what I mean. This one felt more like literary fiction with like a romance subplot, but like in such a fun way. Like, I actually loved the mix of that. This is about a woman called Kenna, and she has gone to prison. And while she was in that, she had a daughter called DM, and she's never met DM, and she's basically come out of prison and she's come back to this town to try and find DM, and she meets Ledger, who is her late partner's best friend, and it basically follows her trying to reconnect with her daughter, and nobody likes her. Everyone in this town thinks she's an awful person because of this thing that she did that got her sent to prison. And you kind of, I think anyway, you end up really sympathising with her and backing her. I definitely did anyway. And it's one of those like super emotional stories where you see where everyone is coming from, and like everybody's carrying all of this like pain and burden, but you just want everyone to have a big hug and love each other. And I absolutely flew through this. I think I read this all in one day, or like over 2 days or something, but I read it very, very quickly. I just thought the writing style is so easy to fly through. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I then did the video that I have most been dreading probably ever. There are several fantasy books that I have been meaning to get to and have not been getting to them. So I set myself the challenge of reading fantasy books for a week. And I have a video of me doing a reading vlog. In that video, I did read the book that I have been meaning to get to for forever, and I'm so happy I finally did, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This, I'm sure we all know, but very briefly, follows Feyre. She is sort of lightly kidnapped by a man called Tamlin and taken to his realm. I say light kidnapping because I can't explain it. It's not a particularly deep kidnapping, if you get my drift. Oh, well, I don't really know what my drift is, other than it's not like she kind of is like, yeah, I'll come with you, that's fine. I can't explain it. It's basically like a bargain thing. It doesn't matter. She is in a different land with this guy called Tamlin. There is a romance subplot, which is super fun. This was such a quick, fast-paced book, and I loved it, and it was so accessible. The reason I kept putting this book off is I just didn't think I was going to understand it, because I kept reading the blurb and not understanding it. Which is a bit silly now that I read it back, because it's not even a complicated blurb, so I think that might have been a mental block of mine. I think I thought a Feyre was a creature, but Feyre is her name. I did talk about this in the vlog. I do still not understand why they called the creatures Fairies and her Feyre. I still find that a little confusing. But as I said, it's Sarah J. Maas's world. She can do what she wants. Who am I to comment? But I did really, really enjoy this, and I'm so excited to continue the series. And actually, somebody with Sarah J Maas knowledge, can you please comment down below what order I can read these series in? Because I own the first 3 books of this, and I plan to like buy the rest of the series. I think there's 2 more I need to get. But I've also got on audiobooks on my library, I can get the Crescent City series, but I don't know if that's like spoilers. And I also want to read the Throne of Glass series, which I keep seeing, but I don't know if Throne of Glass is the first book or if Assassin's Blade is, because I've seen different reading orders. So can someone be an absolute gem and write like every single Sarah J Maas book in order and tell me which order to read them in? Or tell me if it literally doesn't matter and I can just read the 3 series however. But someone please tell me the reading order of Throne of Glass, because I don't know. That's your homework for this week. Thank you very much, class. Then we read Iron Flame, which is the 2nd book in the 4th Wing series by Rebecca Yarros. This was 620 pages and it did take me a very long time. It took me about 6 weeks, I think, to read it. The first half of this book was primarily focused a lot more on like Xaden and Violet's relationship, but they were also apart quite a lot, so it was kind of like you had a lot of their like arguments, but those arguments were quite broken up and like lots of miscommunication and that kind of biz. And then you were getting a lot more of the like kind of political stuff that you were getting in the first book, so a lot more to do with like all of the wars that were going on in the world. And this one was definitely a lot more politics based, I think, than the first one. The first one obviously had a lot more of their like school training, whereas this one, it is still set in the school and you get bits of that, but it's all a bit more interrupted by stuff. The first half of this book is definitely a lot more character based, and then the second half definitely kind of gets that like 4th Wing pace back, where it's like so much is happening and it's like big battles and like all that stuff. And again, another very crazy ending. 4th Wing obviously had such a big plot twist. This one isn't necessarily a plot twist, it's like a cliffhanger. But the 3rd book I think will be very interesting because there's so much to explore in like that setup. I think that setup was really genius. However, this one literally just came out like a couple months ago, so I think we're gonna have to wait a very, 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 very long time for the next one to come out. So I'll probably have forgotten everything that's happened in these books. So I might need a recap, but that's fine. And then finally, we read Quiet Thunder by J.P. Harker as our final fantasy book. This was definitely different to these 2. These both were like quite romantic-y based. They had big romance subplots and were definitely like a lot more high concept. Like they had magical creatures and like magical systems, whereas this one was sort of the opposite of that. It felt more like Game of Thrones vibes. Like it wasn't necessarily magical powers, it was more like tribe based, and there was like elements of magic. Like there was one thing where if they were like drink blood, they kind of got like visions and stuff, but it wasn't like there weren't like mythical creatures running around. This was incredibly graphic. Like I'm not particularly squeamish, but this was testing me. There were lots of very graphic descriptions of like body parts being chopped off and like torture methods and stuff, which does make my toes curl, but it was definitely very visceral writing. If you like war in a fantasy book, you'll love this because this was so like battle heavy. Like this is all about all these different tribes who are warring, and it's kind of like a big power battle for like who is running certain lands and stuff. So I think if you like that kind of fantasy, then this is definitely the one for you. And yeah, there you have it. That is everything I've read up to this point in the year. I have actually now read some more, but I've read them in March, so we're not counting them. I feel like already 2024 has been a really good reading year. I feel like I've really been trying to push my comfort zone a little bit, because fantasy is definitely a genre I found very intimidating, and I feel like now that I've tackled 3 big uns, I do feel a bit more like settled in the genre, and like I can pick up a fantasy book now and not like be quite so panicky about it. Panicky is a little bit dramatic, like it's really not that deep, but it feels deep to me. But yeah, I'm trying to think if any of these were on my 2024 TBR. ACOTAR definitely was. That actually might be it. I meant to put Iron Flame on that 2024 TBR and then just completely forgot to do it, just didn't remember. So I'm counting that as an honorary member of that TBR. But yeah, basically we're not doing brilliantly on that TBR, but that's okay. I still have full faith that we can get through that TBR. I think, yeah, I just need to like dedicate some time to read like a couple of months and then we'll be okay. But the first one off of that TBR was brilliant, so it's a solid start so far. But thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate you. I'm very excited for the rest of this year. I think we've got some excellent books coming up and hopefully some fun content. So if you want to stick around and see some more, hit the subscribe button. I really do appreciate it. I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day. Like the video. Bye!